Hey guys, today is May 9th, 2018, and I want to go over the Heroes of the Storm patch notes. Now, this is one of the bigger balance patch changes they've done in a while. They've been testing out a variety of balance changes for a lot of heroes, and we've been seeing kind of a stale meta, particularly in the support area, as two supports kind of reign supreme in every area, Malfurion and Stukov, while the other supports were kind of getting hit in the back, and there was a few supports like Ana and Ariel who haven't been played in the meta in a long time. So I'm going to go through all of the patch notes, and I'm going to essentially explain what they do, and then I'm going to give my thoughts on what I think that's going to do to the meta. And afterwards, you can toss some comments below of what you think of it. Were my thoughts correct? Do you think that there's something that I missed? I'd love to hear the what everyone thinks. So to start off, we're going to go into Phoenix. Phoenix had a 57% win rate. He was one of the strongest heroes in the game and needed to be toned down. I think I really didn't want them to lower his damage. I wanted them to instead lower his utility. He can jump away from really any fight, so he could hard engage, and he had a really strong slow on his Q, as well as he had shields and regen and all this other stuff that was just incredibly annoying. So they reduced his health, his shields, his regen, as well as the range of his W by quite a bit. Then they reduced the they really nerfed his teleport. They not only increased the cooldown of it, but they also reduced the range. Much needed changes. I still don't know if this is going to be enough, but I really like the step in the right direction. Gul'dan is getting an interesting change. So what they're doing is they're removing a lot of his W talents, or at least changing a lot of his W talents, so he has a W build. Ultimately, Gul'dan had two builds that were played. He had his Echoed Corruption build, which is all about getting a lot of corruption damage off on frontliners. Then he had his Q build, which is essentially about getting a lot of sustained damage as well as a lot of wave clear. One of the strongest builds on Infernal Shrines. Also a really strong build for new players who didn't want to commit a lot into corruption, which was sometimes hard to get a lot of value out of. But they're giving him a new build. And this new build is really interesting. So I'm going to read over these. Firstly, they removed Glyph of Life Drain. If you didn't know what Glyph of Life Drain was, it was a talent at level 1 that was right here. It increases the cast range of Drain Life. Now, they're giving him more. They're essentially moving Glyph of Life Drain onto Chaotic Energy, which is the one that would give you more value out of regen globes, as well as reduce the mana cost of your abilities after you get 20 regen globes. So they're changing this around. So Chaos Energies now increases the amount of regen globe health and mana you get. It still gives you your next ability lower mana cost after you use a regen, or after you pick up a regen globe, and now it increases the range of life drain, and after you collect 20 regen globes, it reduces the mana cost by 20 for everything. So what this does is it makes it to where you don't need to life tap as often, as well as it makes your life drain have longer range, so you can kind of drain on people from further away. Now, on to the level 4 talents. There's Health Funnel, which there's getting additional functionality. So on to what Health Funnel was, is it's essentially this thing that says if an enemy dies while under the effect of Drain Life, the cooldown is instantly refreshed. Alright, so what happens now is on Gul'dan, if you pick this talent, it makes it to where if you use Life Drain for the entire duration, you get your life drain back. But if you don't use life drain for your entire duration and someone dies, then it gets it back as well. The only time you don't get your life drain back completely is if you use life drain on someone who then walks out of the area, or use life drain on someone and you get CC'd. This is going to be amazing if you happen to lane against someone who doesn't have a lot of CC. I think that Gul'dan against Zagara or against some other really strong lane bullies like Malthael, he can actually be a solo laner that will essentially stomp these in solo lane just by going these two talents right here. But wait, there's more. Level 7, they're removing Devour of the Frail. So let's go into level 7, and Devour of the Frail was Drain Life deals 50% more damage to enemies below 50% health. Okay, well, what they're giving him instead is additional functionality on his Curse of Exhaustion, which Curse of Exhaustion is the talent right here that says, upon expiring, corruption slows enemy movements by 50% for 2.5 seconds. That's a pretty big slow for a long time. So what's happening now is on Cursive Exhaustion, what's happening is when you drain life someone who's affected by corruption, it deals 50% more damage and slows the target by 25%. So what's now going to happen with Cursive Exhaustion is you are going to use your E onto someone and immediately drain life, dealing 50% more damage, as well as slowing them until the corruption ends, and then there's going to be a bigger slow after the corruption ends, making him even more of a lane bully, because if someone ever jumps on him who doesn't have a CC, they're going to have to deal with him doing a ton of damage by his W, getting these cooldowns faster by his W, as well as they're pretty much going to be permanently slowed the entire time. This is giving Gul'dan one of the strongest, I would say, single target bullying, healing back, and all that, as long as the enemies don't have CC. An extremely strong lane bully now. Finally, they're nerfing his Haunt ultimate at level 20, which it's not by enough. I really don't think it's going to be a big deal. So, down to Hanzo. I feel like Hanzo, he's getting a nerf on his range for his auto attacks. He's getting a nerf on his range for his jump, as well as his level 4 talent that deals area effect to minions is being nerfed as well. I think that this is a little bit overkill, but this was necessary, as well as this was necessary. So we'll see. Ultimately, that needed to happen. I don't think that needed to happen, but we'll see how it goes. I do think it was strange that after they nerfed his W talent, his Q talent, even in W build, had more wave clear. So maybe that's what their purpose of that was. Kael'thas is getting a lot of changes. So let's go through it one by one. So level 4, Energy Roll. His E talent, Energy Roll, which is right here. When Gravity Lamps hits a hero, its cooldown is reduced by 9 seconds. Well, that talent is also getting the cooldown essentially refunded. The cooldown of Gravity Lamps was already 70 seconds, and now it'll have no mana cost, and its cooldown will be much lower. Meaning if you land one E, you'll likely be able to land another one. Ultimately, the talent that was always picked up here was something that refunded mana and increased the range. Now you're going to refund mana and reduce the cooldown. So if you find that you're always following up your E with another person like a Varian, and you won't need the extra range, it's probably going to be better to be picking up Energy Roll now. But if you find that you're still initiating with this, then it's probably still going to be better to get the bonus range as well as the refund. Either way, they both still synergize really well with your other talents. So I definitely think that is something that's going to be really interesting for a level 4 change. Level 7, Sunfire Enchantment. What Sunfire Enchantment was, it was your trait talent, which essentially made it to where if you activated Verdant Spears, makes your next basic attack instead deal 165 spell damage, which really added a lot of extra damage to Kael'thas, and it was guaranteed damage. Pretty interesting. They're nerfing the spell damage to about the damage that a regular auto attack would be, maybe a little bit more than that. Yeah, it'll be about 30% more than a regular auto attack. But it now empowers 2 auto attacks, as well as if both empowered basic attacks hit heroes, you gain 50% spell damage for 10 seconds. What does that tell you guys? Well, firstly, the trait cooldown is 6 seconds, meaning that you can keep this spell power up permanently as long as you're always using your trait and auto attacking. The other thing that this tells me is with the build that I like to go, I like to use my trait and then use W to get guaranteed damage every 6 seconds. This means that you could get more guaranteed damage off much more often to the front line. I think this will be a good counter to someone like Tracer or to someone like Illidan who's jumping on you and you need that guaranteed damage going off all the time, or just a frontliner who is less scary to be close by, like a Tyrael. Tyrael is going to jump up to you, and it's not going to be really that scary because he can't flip you or toss you or CC you or anything like that. So you can get a lot of guaranteed damage off of someone like a Tyrael. But what do you lose? Well, you lose a level 7 talent that made it to where your Flame Strike, if it hits 2 people, you do 8% of their max health, which is very strong against the double tank comp that we've been dealing with a lot in higher level play. The other thing is something called Sun King's Fury, which you could lose that makes it where you lose damage off of the bouncing of your trait. So I think it's going to be an interesting build. I think it's a lot more guaranteed damage from him and a lot less surprise damage if they have single tank. Cool change. Pyromaniac W build, which was essentially it was a talent level 13 that made it to where every tick the Living Bomb did it would increase your basic cooldown or decrease your basic cooldowns by 1 second. This was pretty much a must pick, honestly. It was picked in every scenario. So they're reducing that from 1 second to half a second, which will probably make the living bomb explosion slow be better, or the increased radius, especially if you combine Sun King's Fury. But it'll make the radius probably viable. But there's more. He gets this talent at level 16, where it makes it to where you can get your Q. Sorry, they removed Arcane Dynamo. I'm going to show you which one Arcane Dynamo is really quick. Arcane Dynamo made it to where using a basic ability increased your spell power by 3% for 5 seconds, stacking up to 15%. But they're adding a new talent here, which makes it to where your Q applies your W. So if you hit people with a Q, now you're getting W's on everyone that was there, which means that every time that you land a Q, everyone now needs to spread out. And if they don't spread out, they're going to take a whole bunch of damage. Now, the reason why I said that this is really frustrating is because at level 13, what I have a feeling that we're going to see is we're going to see maybe Pyromaniac picked up, because you're going to land a Q on 2 people, and boom, your Q's back off cooldown again, and you can reposition it. Or we might just see that people go this range, and they go for bonus damage on spread. And the reason that I say this is because this is going to force people to split up every time you land a Q. Because you're going to use a Q, they're going to have to spread out, and if they don't spread out, then they're going to have to spread out. And if they don't spread out, then they're all dead. So I think this is going to be really interesting. I think that if people are stacking up a lot, you're still going to go the regular build. But if they find that people are only stacking up for small clusters, I think this build's going to be ridiculous. Especially on maps where people are kind of forced to stay close to each other, like on Volskaya or Braxis or anything like that, where they're forced to get close for a little while, and you'll honestly just melt them for so long. And then Presence of Mind's getting a change. Essentially what Presence of Mind was the Pyroblast upgrade that made it to where it increased the radius and reduced the cooldown for each hero hit, which is kind of neat, but it made it to where people would just walk away from it and you wouldn't ever get any value from it. However, now they're making it to where your Flame Strike or your Living Bomb spreads will decrease the cooldown by 10 seconds. Ultimately, I think you're only probably going to land like 3 or 4 Flame Strikes in between a Pyroblast, so the most you're going to be able to lower the cooldown is probably by 20 to 40 seconds. I think these changes are going to make Kilthos a lot more, honestly, damage heavy. He's going to get a lot more guaranteed damage off if the enemies don't have double tanks. If the enemies have double tanks, the build's not going to change at all. But if the enemies have a single tank, he's going to have a lot more damage than usual. I think it's going to be an interesting change. I really do. Now on to Maiev. Maiev is just essentially getting nerfs in her health, her basic attack damage, as well as her cooldown on her ultimate. So Vault of the Wardens gets a increased cooldown from 12 to 13 seconds. Vault of the Wardens was it was just her sorry, not her R, her trait. I don't know why it says R there. Vault of her Wardens is her jump, which is her invulnerability. So I don't know why it says R. It should be D. So that's her jump. Then on to Thrall. Thrall's been kind of a powerhouse lately because of his Q damage, and what they're doing is they're reducing his Q damage, they're reducing the bounce damage, as well as they're changing his Rolling Thunder, which his Rolling Thunder was, I don't have the talents pulled up, but his Rolling Thunder was one of his main picks, but what they're doing is they're making it to where it now restores his health. So it no longer increases his range, but now it restores his health. Pretty cool. Then they're buffing his W talent, his trait, or his quest, I mean. I don't know if it's going to be the best. Tracer's getting a pretty large nerf. It's meaning whenever she uses her E, people can now see where she's using her E. Meaning you can't do those really aggressive where you jump into them and then you're fighting for 5 seconds, then you use your E and then continue fighting for 5 seconds. But it really has no change on those where you jump in, you bomb someone, and jump out. I think it's going to be, honestly, overall, just a nerf and a buff to Stitches. Tychus, he's getting 2 buffs. 2 buffs that I wasn't expecting and 2 buffs that I gladly accept. He's getting a cooldown reduction and a mana cost reduction on his Q, so use more Qs. Cool. And his Bigger They Are talent is getting a little bit of a buff where he gets a cooldown reduction on his trait when he picks it. So effectively, let me pull up Tychus' talents really quick. So what Tychus' talents were at level 4, he had a talent called Fully Loaded, which reduced the minigun cooldown by 5 seconds. That is now getting combined into Bigger They Are. Bigger They Are, in my opinion, was already one of the better talents. So that's going to be pretty rough. That's going to be, honestly, it might lead to a nerf. Bigger They Are was really strong in the solo lane, and unless you were against like multiple tanks, I would say in the rhythm wasn't really the best talent anymore. Is usually Bigger They Are just because of the burst potential that it had. So to see it reducing the cooldown, that's an incredibly strong buff. Medivh is getting a nerf to Arcane Explosion, which honestly I like. It was kind of a must-pick talent for him at level 7, and it was really, really strong. I like that this is going to add a lot more variety to Medivh's builds. All right, so this is going to be one of my favorite parts, is where they are buffing 2 of the supports that needed buffs. So the first support that they're buffing is Ana. Ana, her Shrike talent made it to where she could heal herself by auto-attacking enemy heroes. Now she heals herself by auto-attacking anything, which means Ana can now solo camps. It would take forever, but she can do it. Particularly the 3-man camps like the Goatmen or whatever their names are, and the Shaman camps. And the cool part about that is you can auto-attack and keep your trait on 3 different things at a time. You can out-heal all the damage, and you can clear camps pretty quickly. This also gives her the ability to heal off of minion waves if she's going against a poke-heavy comp. Her healing dart mana cost has been reduced from 15 to 10, which is a huge difference because that means that she can now out-mana regen the amount of healing she can out-mana regen the amount of mana cost that it takes to use Q. So she can stay in lane forever by auto-attacking minions as well as healing everyone without needing to worry about mana costs. Nano Boost is getting a nerf. It kind of deserved it. Honestly, it's her strongest ult, and it's still pretty much the must-pick. Still an amazing ult if you combine it with someone like a Jaina or KT or a Gul'dan. Seeing as Gul'dan and KT are getting some small buffs, she probably needed that. Detachable box magazine. The first reward is removed. The first reward has now been baseline, so no worries about that. The second reward has been reduced in the amount of times it takes to get these stacks, making her level 1 essentially just get a basic buff. But this right here is what's going to make Ana back in the meta, in my opinion. What this does is Debilitating Dart was already an ability that reduced heroes' damage by 50% for 4 seconds with a 20-second cooldown. But now, it doesn't do it for 4 seconds, it does it for 3 seconds, but it also slows them by 50%. Well, guess what, guys? Now you can sleep dart someone, and you can slow them. So that if, say, someone walks up to you that joins the fight, like a Vala, who doesn't have any CC early game, you can use your sleep dart, you could walk up, the Vala could walk up, and you can slow them, you could turn off their healing, and you and Vala can tear them apart. So I think this is going to be a must pick because after level 7, you're going to be able to lead to kills pretty much by yourself as long as you have at least one person with you. You don't need their CC, you don't need their anything, just a little bit of extra damage from them and you'll be able to go for kill after kill after kill. This is exactly what Ana needed. She's going to hit a huge power spike at level 7. I think these changes were definitely needed for Ana, and I certainly think that it's going to bring her back just a little bit into the meta. Auriel's biggest problem, in my opinion, was that she couldn't really do any healing by herself. And if you had a strong team and you were winning, she made you pretty much unstoppable. But if you didn't have a strong team and you were losing, she pretty much felt useless. So now what's happening is if you've ever been auto-attacking minions and you got your energy back, but you felt like it was a little too slow, that has now been doubled. You now gain double the energy back from auto-attacking minions and mercs. This is much needed. This allows her to heal a little bit better against poke comps where your team's not doing any damage to enemy heroes. She gets a few changes into some of her other abilities. I don't think any of these are going to be really that big. They're going to be pretty cool. But this one right here is very interesting. Now, it looks like a 15% buff, right? You're increasing the armor, which is reducing the damage your team takes by 15, right? But what's actually happening is it's more than a 15% buff because you're going from 40% damage taken to 25% damage taken. This is actually a 60% increase in survivability on a level 20 talent. It's a huge buff, but it's level 20 talent, so I usually don't get too much into those. Down to Deckard. Which ultimately, what I think about Auriel is I think that these changes will bring her back a little bit and just make her a little bit more interesting to play. One thing that I'd still like to see on her is I'd like to see the wall indicators appear so that she has an easier time landing her E. On to Deckard. Deckard, in my opinion, was a really strong healer already, but they felt that his win rate was still a little low. And they said a healthy win rate between 47 and 51% in high-level play. It's definitely interesting. Now, Lornado. Lornado was honestly, it was an underwhelming ultimate ability. It worked a little bit in low ranks because people would wake up everyone too early in low ranks for his other ult, so they're reducing the cooldown of Lornado. Sapphire is getting a increase on the slow. I already liked Sapphire because it was a guaranteed land on a slow, as opposed to trying to throw your entire combo to land a root. If you didn't land the root, you pretty much wasted everything. So I always liked Sapphire because you could toss a quick Sapphire, land a slow, and your team can follow up on a kill. So buff to Sapphire is really good for me. But his other level 1 talent is still kind of a must pick in areas where people might be clustering. Ruby got a buff. Ultimately, I still don't think it's worth it. The problem with Ruby was it was hard to get to those healing potions after you used them. Ancient Blessings got a nerf. I think it needed it. Ultimately, I think this was the smallest nerf they could possibly give it and still have people be okay with it. Followed with Bottomless Flasks got a nerf. I think it was probably needed. In the times that Bottomless Flasks was good, it was way too good. And in the times that it was bad, you should never pick it. So I think that it's okay to nerf it just for those few situations where it was really good. Ultimately, I think Deckard is an amazing healer right now that doesn't really... he's not really OP in any situation other than maybe if you combine his ult with another ult. But I also don't think that he's underpowered. So I like these changes as they buff a few things, they nerf a few things, and they should be pretty good. Lily's getting a buff, she's getting a buff to her trait build and a nerf to her W build. Her W build's no longer getting the cooldown reduction on the Cloud Serpent, which is frustrating because you used to be able to get 2 Ws off on both of your tanks and making the level 16 making both of your tanks unkillable. Now, W build's only going to be good picked into people that you need to blind, and it's going to be less good picked into people who... like a double tank comp, which is what my second reason for picking W build was. Now, I think that I really still think her Q build is exactly where it was before, so if you liked her Q build, awesome. Her trait build is better than it was before. What her trait build essentially was is her trait already gave cooldown reduction and movement speed. Now it's going to give you cooldown reduction for longer, and then if you pick the talent, it's also going to be giving you mana regen. So what happened before... was when you got the cooldown reduction, if you stayed in a fight, you would often burn out of your mana costs because you'd be casting all your abilities so fast. You'd burn out of your mana costs and you'd kind of get pushed out of lane. Now with the trait build, you'll have enough mana to stay in lane for longer. So my only reason that I still don't like the trait build is it forces you into a position where you're taking damage to get value out of one of your talents. I don't know if that's good. I think it'll be a must pick against a dive hero like Tracer or Illidan who might be diving in your back line and attacking specifically you. As now you're going to have movement speed, you're going to have lower cooldowns, and you're going to have mana regen to survive the dive hero, as well as still be able to heal all of your team at the same time. She's gaining additional functionality from this, which was, let me just pull up the Lily builds really quick. The Lily talents, I want to make sure that I get this correct. So on level 4, she's getting additional functionality on this talent right here, which you're able to activate your trait to get bonus movement speed. Now you're getting passive bonus movement speed on that trait. So it is a pretty good thing to be getting. So you passively increase your movement speed. This means that you will be able to move around very quickly even if you don't want to mount up, getting around all the fights. This also allows you to take a little bit of hits from abilities while still having the movement speed to get away from other things. I think it's going to be making the trait build pretty valuable, especially since you're going to be gaining the, the extra bonuses and stuff. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. We'll see how that rolls out. Now, Morales is getting 2 easy, small changes. One, she's getting a buff to Trauma Trigger, which Trauma Trigger was this thing that if you got hit by something, you would get... if you got hit and you got below 40% health, you'd get 30 armor for like 4 seconds or something, 3 or 4 seconds. But it had a 60-second internal cooldown. They felt that was too long. Now it has a 30-second cooldown. This makes it to where if someone jumps on you and you pick that talent, you're going to be very hard to kill, and they can dive on you more often, and you're still going to be very hard to kill. Then they're nerfing her level 16 talent, reducing the range from 40 to 30. I think this is overkill. Personally, this is one of the only talents that made it to where she was safe after level 16. Now she's pretty much in trouble, so you might be forced to get this talent. We'll see. Malfurion and Stukov had huge problems. They were kind of the must picks in the support world. Both of them are getting nerfs, pretty much just numbers nerfs. Malfurion's just getting numbers reduced in every area. Stukov's getting cooldown nerfs, which is pretty rough to his E, reducing or increasing the cooldown by 2 seconds baseline, and by an extra second if you went for the growing infestation. He's also getting a reduction on his mana restoration on his one good spread, which pretty much is going to take him from being an infinite mana support by getting one good spread to being a support that will have mana problems in really long fights, which were the fights that he thrived on. I don't know if this is going to be too much of a nerf right there. I think this was a much needed nerf for sure, but I think this might be too much. Then they're buffing his It Hungers talent, which was essentially a talent that lowered your cooldown when you used your E on heroes, as well as it restored mana. But you didn't get the range bonus from his other E talent. So what they're trying to do is make it to where if you want your mana costs and your cooldowns to be more reasonable, you have to position more aggressively. But if you're going to be positioning all the way away from the team, then you're going to have to deal with lower mana cost, or sorry, higher mana costs as well as lower cooldown. Higher cooldowns, higher mana costs. I think this was a much-needed change to Stukov. It kind of hurts me a little bit because I like to play Stukov, but I ultimately like it. You either have to position more aggressively or you have to deal with the fact that you can't last in fights as long. Garrosh, he's getting a slight change to where his stun duration's lowered, but his slow amounts increased. It's going to be about the same for people who are running away or running towards you, as you're still going to be able to slow them for the same amount, but it's going to be nerf his in-fight capabilities where you're stunning people who were just staying in the fight to begin with. I think it's a really good change, but personally I would have liked to see more changes having to do with his throw, because personally his throw stun combo is just way too strong, and he's too oppressive on certain maps where you have to get on a certain point to do anything. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Sonya's getting a lot of talents moved around. I think that this is going to be pretty good for the people who would always get a camp at level 4. Now you're going to have to do camps a little bit slower if you always want to get a camp at level 4. I think this is giving her some good buffs during fights, but it's giving her kind of a nerf in her macro play a little bit early game. But she'll still have the same macro play later. They also move her talent to level 7. Let me pull up Sonya talents because you're also going to have to make a decision on where you want to be picking things now. So what's happening is at level 7, Shot of Fury is going to move to level 4, which Battle Rage was always kind of a must pick. Battle Rage is being moved to level 7, which is going to force you to decide, do you want to get Poison Spear or do you want to get Battle Rage? Do you want to be able to have self-healing, or do you want to be able to and do more damage to minions, or do you want to be able to burst people? This is going to force Sonya into a more, do you want to play macro game or do you want to play micro game? By moving Battle Rage up here, it's going to make her W build likely the build for going for camps. But at the same time, it's going to make her her Q build more of the DPS build, as your Shot of Fury is going to be moved down. Now, Shot of Fury means after you cast Seismic Slam, you're going to get more basic attack damage, which basic attack damage also works well with the Q build. So we're honestly just going to see two major changes to where she has to decide more macro play or more team fight capabilities. She'll still have a lot of both, but she's not going to have as much of either at the same time. So I think this is a really good change to Sonya. She kind of thrived in a lot of situations. Now she's very particular. You have to really decide if you want to go focus on one or the other. I like this because it adds a little bit more build variety into her comp, and I think she's going to have more than just one guaranteed build. So let me know what you guys think about the balance changes and about what I personally think this is going to do to the meta. Overall, I think this was a much needed balance change that was, I mean, kind of, it's like the meta was getting kind of stale. We were seeing the same two supports all the time. There were certain supports we weren't seeing anymore, as well as there's a bruiser and a tank that's being seen all the time. These changes, most of the assassin changes, were pretty unexpected. So ultimately, I'm pretty excited. I don't know if I went over the Medivh changes. He's just getting the Arcane Explosion reduced by half. Pretty much needed because that was the must pick on that talent tree. So I think I did already talk about it. But yeah, this was the balance changes for today. I really like them overall, but I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. Toss in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and I always appreciate some subscribers. Thank you.